For almost 40 years, The Legend of Zelda has been telling us stories. It spun yarns about a hero in green, a princess with sacred power, and a great evil that just refuses to stay dead. These are the legends of Hyrule. What happens when you try to cram a fluid legend into this rigid box that is a historical timeline? You get a puzzle that has obsessed fans for a decade and even slightly longer. In 2011, Nintendo finally gave us what we thought was the key, an official timeline connecting every single game into one grand saga. But that key didn't unlock a treasure chest of answers. It opened a Pandora's box of contradictions, retcons and plot holes so big they could swallow Breath of the Wild's map in one. Nintendo tried to unite a kingdom of stories, but in the process they might have shattered its history for good. Welcome to The Legend of Zelda Beyond the Timeline. Before 2011, the Zelda Timeline was just stuff of playground arguments and late night forum debates. Fans spent years piecing together clues, desperate to connect the dots. We all pretty much agreed on the direct sequels, but a single unified theory? That felt like a pipe dream. Then, for the series' 25th anniversary, Nintendo released The Legend of Zelda Hyrule Historia. It was this beautiful, heavy book packed with concept art and developer notes. But its main event, and really the main takeaway, was a chapter called The History of Hyrule. For the first time ever, we had an official Nintendo stamped map of Hyrule's long and tangled past. And the reaction was electric. Finally there was order. The timeline set Skyward Sword as a definitive origin story, showing us a creation of the Master Sword and the very first Link and Zelda. From there it laid out a clear path through games like the Minish Cap and Four Swords, leading right into the most important game of the entire franchise, Ocarina of Time. And I'm not saying Ocarina of Time is the most important because it's the best. I'm saying that because the entire timeline hinges on the events of that one game. This book was Nintendo declaring, yes, it's all connected. It was validating years of fan theories while also laying down the law. For a minute, it really felt like the Great Timeline War was over. We had our history written by the creators themselves. But this straightforward path was about to take the most bizarre and controversial turn imaginable. Because at the end of Ocarina of Time, the timeline doesn't just split, it shatters into three pieces. And this is where everything starts to become interesting. Ocarina of Time is the definitive anchor for the entire Zelda saga. Its whole plot, with Link time travelling 7 years into the future, is the reason the timeline gets so weird. When the game ends, Zelda sends Link back to original time to let him live out his childhood. This one act creates two separate futures. First, you have the child timeline. This follows the young Link who just got back. Armed with knowledge of the future, he warns the royal family about Ganondorf's betrayal before it happens. And this leads to a whole new chain of events, including the stories of Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess. This branch makes perfect sense based on the game's own time travel rules. Secondly, there's the adult timeline. This branch follows the future that Link left behind. With no hero to save the day, Hyrule is left defenceless when Ganondorf eventually breaks free. In a last-ditch effort, the gods just flood the entire kingdom, creating the Great Sea you sail across in The Wind Waker and its sequels. It's a tragic ending, but again, it's a logical consequence of the hero being gone. And then there's the third one. The one that kind of came out of nowhere, the one with absolutely no basis in any of the Zelda games that have been made, and it's called the Fallen Hero Timeline. According to Hyrule Historia, there's a third possibility at the end of Ocarina of Time. What if Link lost to Ganon? In this timeline, the hero is defeated, Ganon gets the whole Triforce, and the world falls apart. This disaster supposedly leads to the Imprisoning War, which is the backstory for A Link to the Past. This branch is where Nintendo decided to place most of the classic 2D Zelda games, including the original Legend of Zelda. The problem? This outcome is never shown, hinted at, or even suggested in Ocarina of Time. The only way Link can be defeated is if you, the player, get a game over screen, which is never an official part of the story in any game. The first two timelines are born from in-game events. The Fallen Hero timeline is born from a hypothetical what if. It feels less like a clever plot twist and more like a convenient dumping ground for all the older games that didn't fit anywhere else. It was a retcon of the highest order, a piece of cosmic duct tape used to patch a hole we didn't even know was there. The crazy three-way split is the most obvious problem, but believe me, it's not the only one. If you look closer at the cleaner branches, you'll find they're also riddled with cracks and contradictions. It really starts to feel like those stories were forced to fit together after the fact. Let's take a look at the child timeline, which should be the most straightforward. The official timeline places 4 Swords Adventures right after Twilight Princess, but the backstory of 4 Swords Adventures talks about a brand new Ganondorf being born, stealing a magic trident and becoming a demon king. This makes no sense. In Twilight Princess, we dealt with the same Ganondorf from Ocarina of Time. He was supposed to be executed, survived because of the Triforce of Power, and was then sealed away and defeated. So how is there a new reincarnated Ganondorf when the old one was just dealt with? The timeline doesn't really explain it, leaving fans to cook up wild theories to fill a plot hole the lore just ignores. The adult timeline isn't much better. At the end of The Wind Waker, Hyrule is gone, left at the bottom of the ocean. Link and Tetra sail off to find a new land. Fast forward about 100 years to Spirit Tracks. In that time, they've not only found a new continent, but also established a brand new kingdom of Hyrule, complete with a society powered by a complex magical train system. It's not a direct contradiction, but the jump is so massive that it feels completely disconnected from the world we just left. But the biggest messes are in the Fallen Hero timeline, which isn't surprising since it was made up to begin with. This branch is supposed to be the history leading to the original 1986 Legend of Zelda, but the games inside it are constantly fighting with each other. For example, Hyrule Historia says the timeline happens after Link is defeated in Ocarina of Time. By that point in the game, Link would have already defeated the twin witches Kotaki and Kumi, and yet they show up again alive and well in the Oracle games, which are set later in the exact same timeline. How? We have no idea. The timeline also creates a huge paradox. If a whole new reality can be created just because Link could have lost, then why does that only apply for Ocarina of Time? Shouldn't there be a timeline where Link failed to beat Vati in the Minish Cap, or one where he lost to Demise in Skyward Sword? Why does this one specific failure get to break reality? The Fallen Hero timeline doesn't just contradict other games, it contradicts itself. And for years upon years, fans could kind of deal with these issues. You could squint, accept a few weird explanations, and make it work. And then Breath of the Wild came out in 2017. The game was a masterpiece from start to finish. But for timeline theorists, it was their idea of hell. It didn't just bend the rules of the timeline, it snapped them entirely in half. Breath of the Wild is set thousands of years in the future, long after any other game. But the big question is, which future? The game seems to reference all 3 timelines at once. You have the Rito, a bird race that only exists in the adult timeline. You have places named after characters from the child timeline, and you have direct references to the Imprisoning War, a key event from the Fallen Hero timeline. The game was a walking contradiction. It was like all three timelines had crashed into each other. When fans asked Nintendo's producers about it, they were super vague, saying it's the end, but refusing to say which end. They told us to use our imaginations. It wasn't a clarification, really. It was a kind of shrug of the shoulders, what if. And then came the sequel, Tears of the Kingdom, which just blew the whole thing wide open. The story introduces an even more ancient past, with the Zonai, King Rauru, and the very first imprisoning war against a Ganondorf we've never seen before. This new backstory seems to completely overwrite the origins of Hyrule we learned about in Skyward Sword. It shows a founding of the kingdom that's impossible to square with what we already knew. But Tears of the Kingdom essentially creates its own separate history. It's so disconnected that if you go to Nintendo's official website today, Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom are shown completely separate from the other three branches. This is due in the editing process. I think I should clarify very quickly on my last point that I am also aware there is an argument that this is actually a second imprisoning war, and that the timeline of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom is so far advanced in the future, so far ahead of every other game, that even the distant past that occurs in Tears of the Kingdom could occur ahead of all other games. So I just wanted to clarify that now before I ended up having to have that conversation in the comments. But anyway, let's go back to be in full flow. They aren't at the end of any path. They're off of an island by themselves. This was the final admission from Nintendo. The timeline, as one single story, is officially broken. So how did we get here? Was it just a massive oversight? The truth is actually much simpler, and it's something that series creator Shigeru Miyamoto and producer Eiji Aonuma have been saying for years. The timeline was never the main point. In interview after interview, they've admitted that when they make a Zelda game, they focus on gameplay first. They care about making a fun, innovative, and compelling standalone adventure. The story and where it fits in the grand scheme of things always comes second. Aonuma himself has said that he doesn't like sticking too close to the timeline because it boxes their teams in and limits their creative freedom. They don't pick a spot in the history of Hyrule and design the game to fit. They make the game they want to make, and then maybe they try to figure out where it could go later. This philosophy explains everything. It explains why there's a new Ganondorf seemingly out of nowhere, why the Fallen Hero timeline was invented as a catch-all, and why Breath of the Wild is a melting pot of lore from every timeline. The developers cared more about making a great game than about making a consistent history book. The inconsistencies aren't mistakes, they're just side effects of a process that values legend telling over history keeping. So, is the Zelda timeline really broken? If you're trying to read it like a history textbook, then yeah, it's an absolute mess. It's a tangle of contradictions and retcons held together by wishful thinking. The made-up three-way split, the plot holes in every branch, and the modern chaos of Breath of the Wild all prove that the timeline just can't support its own weight. But maybe that's the wrong way to look at it. Maybe the problem isn't the timeline, but what we expect it to be. The series is called The Legend of Zelda. A legend isn't history. A legend is a story passed down through generations, with the details changing and twisting with every retelling. If you think about it that way, each game isn't a chapter in a history book. It's a new version of an old myth. This view actually honours what the developers have been saying all along. It lets a link to the past be its own story, and Ocarina of Time live on its own. Separate telling of a similar struggle without them needing to match up perfectly. It allows Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom to be a legend from a far-flung future, where the details of the past have all blurred together into one mythic age. The timeline isn't broken. It's a living tapestry, one that's constantly being rewoven with new threads. Thinking of it as a collection of legends doesn't make the lore weaker, it makes it richer. It turns the contradictions from frustrating plot holes into fascinating variations of a grand, epic myth that has kept us hooked for decades and will probably keep us hooked for many, many more. But that's just my take. What do you think? Is the timeline a hopeless mess, or is it a beautiful tapestry of myths? And what's the one inconsistency that drives you crazy the most? Let me know your theories down in the comments below. This was just episode 1 of my 8-part series all about the timeline of The Legend of Zelda. So if you're excited for more, please subscribe to the channel and make sure you've liked this video so it goes out to as many people as possible. Thank you for watching. I've been the Zelda Realm, and I'll see you next week.